Hi, everyone. Welcome to season 5 of Radical Embodiment, the podcast. I'm your host, Emily Wishall. And today I'm excited to get to share with you Alexandra Durigan. We just completed the interview, and it's, I think, really juicy isn't quite the right word, but has a lot of juice in it, specifically for anyone who identifies as female and is curious other alternatives outside of typical allopathic medicine when it comes to your reproductive and sexual health. I know Alexandra personally through a deep, intimate dance movement, transformative community I'm a part of. And so it's an honor to get to have her on the podcast. She's a women's specialty registered nurse, women's pelvic health specialist, and founder of Origin Pelvic Care. It was Alexandra's personal journey and experiences within women's health that led to the passion and mission of her work, More for Our Womanhood. From working in Western allopathic care to founding of her private practice, Origin Pelvic Care, Alexandra is here to share the importance of pelvic care throughout the journey of womanhood so that women may live radiant lives led from the beauty of their well-nourished centers. Alexandra's point of view is that when women and the womb are taken care of, the world is taken care of. Through our well-nourished bodies, we can pave a new way forward, creating new possibilities for our womanhood and lives. Her personal practice is in Boulder, Colorado, where she serves women in the realms of sexuality and pleasure, reproductive health, and the birth continuum. She also serves women in online group spaces and programs. So I hope, and I know, I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy the interview, and there's a lot of good wisdom and nuggets in there and ways to learn about working with Alexandra if you feel called to do that. So enjoy the episode. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm here today with Alexandra Durigan. This is my first ever. We are together in the human flesh. So normally we meet on Zoom. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see we're in the same room, which is sweet. It's a sweet treat.
It's super sweet.
Yeah, I'm really happy to have you here and get to dive in.
Me too.
Awesome. So we're going to start with the question I always begin with of what embodiment means to you.
I love this question. To me, embodiment means really being in the body. And the way that I feel like I come into relationship with embodiment is when I sense and feel and notice and hear what my body is saying. And then in service to that, listening and letting that inform a deeper truth for my life and for myself. For example, informing what I need, how I need to care for my body. If my body is feeling tired, then how do I provide rest for my body? When things feel good, noticing that in my body. And when things don't feel good, noticing that in my body. And I feel like for me, it's really informed then the relationships that I enter, the relationships that I have in my life, things that I've let go of based on really deeply sensing and feeling my body. Yeah. And I spent a lot of time outside of my body, not feeling those things.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have. I'm curious if you could put into an articulate, tangible sense, and I'm sure this shows up in myriad of ways, but when you say that, you get a sense in your body of maybe a resonance or you feel something, if something's right for you or wrong or not the right time, or it's time to let go of this. How do you experience that?
Yeah.
And I'm imagining it might be a whole host of things, but what are some examples of how that shows up?
Yeah. That might feel like a warmth or a sense of excitement in my heart, or a drawing towards oh, I feel this pull towards that, or oh, I feel this aversion from that. I really, really love paying attention to what makes me feel like I am in my soft belly. Where, because to me, my soft belly is a safe. It's a very safe, oh, I'm aware that safety is possible here, or I'm supported in safety. There's sustenance here for me. It's oh, I'm in my soft belly. This supports my soft belly. I love paying attention to that. And or vice versa. If it's oh, I feel really tense around this person in this environment. I feel uneasy. I maybe feel nauseous in my belly. That's always a lot of information for me. And I also love feeling like where I feel alive in my hips. And my hips have become like a really deep place that I tune into in my life a lot, and practice being within them. And also noticing again that like threshold, depending on the environment or the interaction or the relationship, like, do I feel like I can be in soft belly and wide hips or no?
Mhm.
So those are some places that I feel like I tune into a lot.
Awesome. Awesome. We
Yeah.
can ask more on that, but
Yeah.
I want to go back to what you shared before. You spent a lot of your life
Yeah.
out of your body. So I'm going to just kind of set and ask a few questions, and then I'd love to just hear some of your journey and experience through that of, being a woman and, identifying as female in a female body, growing up, United States, growing up in different cultures. Take us through a little bit, of your journey in your body and being, who you are, the work that you do. I imagine you now have some insight of when did you first start of being out of your body, or when you can track that, and maybe some reasonings as to why. Let's kind of start there.
Yeah. Yeah. So my journey really began in 5th grade. I was the first one in my class to get my menstrual cycle. And I came into my womanly body rather quickly. And really quickly, I learned that my womanly body like wasn't safe. I started to receive looks from older men. The girls in my class didn't love that I was developing, right? Or like young boys would give me different looks, different attention. The attention on my body changed, and my deep, wide, womanly form felt really unsafe. And I think, also as young women, we come into our menstrual years, into our rhythms, into our blood, and it's like we don't have lineage and culture that deeply supports a sense of belonging and relationship to what that is and all of the changes that our body undergo. And so I ended up developing an eating disorder, and that took me until my final years of high school. And then I went to treatment. It became life-threatening, and it was in treatment that I really realized like, oh, I've been living frozen, disassociated, contracted, like outside of my body for pretty much the wholeness of my maidenhood at that point. And so that became then my path of like, I kind of call it like climbing back into my body, starting to feel again, starting to resensitize to this vessel jet, just shut down, armored and starved, really. Because I wasn't in her and I couldn't feel her. She didn't feel safe. And then I couldn't hear how to take care of her. And so as I started climbing back down into my body and feeling her again, and my sensations were turning on, it was like I could hear for the first time how to take care of her. And that journey of taking care of her for me really began in nourishing my sexuality and really rediscovering that my sexuality is deeply sacred. And restoring my menstrual cycle. I lost my menstrual cycle. That also took a toll on my mental health, and that just threads into so many things for us as women. And then I wanted to help other women. I was like, how do we as women have spaces where we get to learn about our bodies, feel safe in our bodies, nourished in our bodies, informed, empowered? And like, where do we get to start inhabiting ourselves as women again? And so it was really natural at the time for me to go to nursing school. I grew up in Rochester, Minnesota, where the Mayo Clinic is. It was the nation's #1 hospital. And it was just like, oh, that's a really natural step. I can help women by becoming a women's specialty nurse. And so then I went on that path. But during my years of college, I was really then tending myself and paying attention and restoring my cycle. And again, like I said, like coming back to my sexuality and really experiencing that as something sacred for the first time.
And if you don't mind, kind of like, if we can expand on that, I'm imagining you're in your young 20s.
Yeah.
Was there someone that you had as support or showing you this way? Did you just happen to have an experience to start to like feel that and explore it in a way that, because I think to explore sexuality, sacredness is like so important.
Totally.
And kind of an ultimate gift or for all of us. And you have to feel safe
Totally
to do that.
Yeah.
And so, a young 20-year-old woman, was that just kind of the natural cycle after, okay, starting, healing from eating disorder? How did you get
Yeah,
to decide that and discover that for yourself?
a sense of worth and value. And I
Mhm.
had a best friend who we were kind of exploring that together.
Mhm.
And it became this safe space between us that we were talking about our bodies and languaging them and noticing them and hearing what we desired, hearing what felt good, and just starting to like explore ourselves in a new way. And for me, that started really simply. Nourishment and food was a huge one.
Mhm.
Getting my cycle back was
Mm.
also so big because I started to notice my feminine rhythms.
Mm.
I started to learn when I had more energy and what I didn't,
Mhm.
and what it was to like actually allow myself to rest on my bleed. The kind of engagements that felt really good, like the bars didn't feel good to me as I
Mhm.
started really listening. So I stopped going to places like that. And I started engaging in places that did feel really good to me and that enhanced and supported my sense, again, of worth and value that I was starting to feel within my own self. I learned as I brought my own hands to my body, like what felt good.
Mm.
And that was so much slowness
Mm.
and so much care and so much compassion. And compassion was essential for me
Yeah.
in my path of healing because it was so much like forgiveness of self, but just compassion towards what I had experienced as a woman
Mm.
and like allowing myself to be cared for in ways that like I didn't feel like were possible before. And just that like thread of compassion and like watering a sense of enoughness and watering like when it was really hard. Yeah, it was a compassionate self meeting. Um yeah, and in that, I think I was really lucky the people that I got to be around in college and then moving out to Colorado. And when I
Mhm.
got my first nursing job, and we would have more spiritually led conversations and this idea and other possibility of my sexuality being sacred was really presented to me and
Mm.
able to be explored for the first time.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So let's go into, so you pursued nursing to
Yeah.
specialize in women's
Yeah.
health and care. Kind of take us. And so sounds like your first job post school was in Colorado.
It was, yeah. And so I was working on a women's and children's specialty unit. So what that meant was my patients at the time on this unit were getting hysterectomies, their uterus removed, oophorectomies, ovarian removal, and an array of reproductive surgeries.
Yeah.
And then we were also supporting, and I had roles in labor and delivery and then the postpartum.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was really immediately faced with the perpetuated trauma that happens in the allopathic healthcare system. And I really attribute like my own self journey to giving me this lens of perception of being able to ask why. Like, why are so many women having these reproductive surgeries? Why, when I listen to the stories of these women, do they share that they've lived their whole life in pain?
Yes.
Or separated from their sexuality or not feeling safe in their body? And when I inquired about the care that they received, it was like little to none.
Yeah.
And it was so familiar, to my own journey. And how rarely we're supported as women and our sexual and reproductive bodies. And then
so much.
Yeah.
I just have to interject and just even say, if anyone even looks specifically, and this isn't like, I'm not trying to like, and I know you're not either, poo-poo Western medicine, but when it comes to women's health, and if we look at research or studies, like so little done on women's health, women's reproductive health. So little. And some of the studies that were pretty unethical, not done well. And anyway, that's all. I just want to like, it doesn't track other than, what's behind this?
Yeah.
Money, I think. And other things. So anyway, but yeah.
Yeah.
I just feel really fired up the last several months about this topic because it's shown up a
Yeah.
lot with my clients, my work with friends, my own self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we have severed sexual health from whole health a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, gynecology is a bit unethical. Like we can't meet feminine bodies with sterility and pharmaceuticals as the gold standard of care. Like that's it's not care. And that was what was so confronting for me in the nursing ward. And then watching all of these women have birth traumas and handoff reports or like episiotomy, 3rd degree, you know, 2nd degree, like it was no big deal.
Yeah.
It was like this deeply accepted culture. And it hurt my body, and my body was like, this doesn't feel good. So, you know, those like the first moments of our conversation today of that, like being in our body and feeling when something doesn't feel right, none of it felt right. And I knew that there had to be something else. And I was starting to taste and experience that something else for my own self. And so, yeah, I started asking a lot of questions. And for me, that's what brought me home to the womb and the pelvic bowl, which is the work that I do today. And my deep inquiry through pelvic care is like, one, how do we hold reverence and respect for women in the womb, which is the origin of life? What are our practices that are caretaking the body of women and the womb and the whole pelvis and our sexual bodies and our reproductive bodies so that we can be in vital health throughout our life? Like, why are we so unwell that our outcomes are massive surgeries, removing our organs of life? It didn't make sense.
Right.
And Western medicine couldn't answer those questions for me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that led to me exiting allopathic care and really starting to stand and practice something more for our womanhood.
Yeah.
And that's
amazing. So let's, beautiful.
Yeah.
And so needed.
Yeah.
So needed. And I'm not going to remember the words you just said, but when you first started, the womb as it is the creation of life. And it is. And then, and to be able to be shown, be taught, be supported, and having reference for a womb, or even just that space, if you no longer have your physical womb, is such a gift and so needed and so necessary. So before we go even deeper into the work you do, and I'm curious, so as your journey, you know, as you're moving through this as a woman, specifically with your history, what you shared, you know, having an eating disorder, healing yourself throughout that. How did you, was there anything that came up for you, especially working as a nurse in allopathic medicine and in your relationship with your body, other than what you kind of just shared? And
just that those same threads of what made me feel so unsafe and so unprepared for my womanhood, for my bleed, for my menstruation, for my sexuality, that is something that women experience throughout the whole spectrum of their lives in our current society and in our current cultural norms, as well as in the lack of care and lineage of the womb in our healthcare settings. And so that for me, it became cultivating something different and reprioritizing the wellness of my womb, reprioritizing the deep importance of my menstrual health, reprioritizing my sexual body, bringing my hands to my body. And that took me into the wellspring of pelvic care. I mean, learning that womb massage is possible for like the first time, my world was cracked open. And there I was when I was in college. I got an ultrasound of my womb and they shared with me that it was retroverted. And I was studying at the nation's #1 hospital, was told I had a retroverted womb, was told that that creates infertility and that there's nothing I can do.
like, that's the end of story.
Period.
Yeah.
And then that eventually, because retroverted uteruses create deep congestion, it's a pain point for our pelvis. It's a complete imbalance in our pelvic bowl. And then we can have things like miscarriages. We can have things like infertility. And eventually, a lot of women get hysterectomies because the womb has been out of balance their entire life, causing massive stress response and hormonal disruption their entire life. And there I was in the place of the gold standard of care. And it was accepted as normal and put on a trajectory of surgery one day. And I just like couldn't be with that. So then finding out like, whoa, womb care exists.
Yes.
Our womb can come into center. I can be in relationship to the regenerative health of my feminine body.
Yeah.
It's a completely other realm of possibility for our womanhood.
1000% of recognizing, oh, it's not just end of story. There's
not
actually
end of story.
So many other things that can help support you.
Totally.
Yeah. So take us through kind of your journey of, if you don't mind sharing too, even just dealing with a retroverted uterus, and then kind of leaving allopathic care. Like, how did you support your own body? Because that might be new information to some listeners too, of not knowing what's possible.
Womb massage, hands-on womb massage. Like I felt like I relearned anatomy from a completely different body of knowledge after nursing school and coming into these womb-led practices. Like I shared, tuning into my menstruation, really hearing her that the dark brown blood wasn't normal, that the clots weren't normal, that the cramping and fatigue wasn't normal. So
these are all signs.
These are all signs. So this is for me as like the loss of womb lineage and language, because our womb is languaging to us through all of these signs and symptoms. But for me now, like symptom as story. And so I wasn't hearing that story that she was calling out, that I'm in balance and I need deep care. And so as I started to like remember that language, oh, she's calling for help through this menstrual cramp. And then I learned the tools of womb massage and supported my uterine body and coming back into center. And then my bleed was bright red and no longer dark brown. And I got to feel ease in my bleed. And then I stopped having resentment towards my body. It changes everything for us. And so that was huge for me, and also began to just feed this like sense. And I feel like as women, like every morsel that we get to come back into our body, that we get to come back into empowered relationship with our physiology, that we start to sense and feel our tissues. I like find over and over again that we come back into remembrance. And I use the word sacred because it is like of how sacred and worthy we are, and how sacred and worthy these parts of our body are. And that's just not how we were raised. And we can end up just so far off from ourselves, yearning to come back into center, yearning to feel. And then even just that like palpable physical alignment of my womb being in center, it was like, oh, I can access my center. That was also really big for me. And so I think that like, I didn't know pelvic care existed. I didn't know womb massage existed. I didn't know these deeper practices that support our feminine physiology existed. And they do, and they're very real. And I feel like that message alone for us as women, to know that something else is possible, is so highly valuable, because I would say like 99.9% of women who come to my practice are like, I didn't know this care existed. I didn't know that I could be touched and tended in my pelvic bowl and body. But then that also comes up against sexual health as whole health, which I take it back to like the founding of gynecology, where that was really severed. And even in nursing school, like a woman was giving birth, and we learned like, don't make it sexual. And it's so sexual, and it's so beautiful and so deserving of so much reverence. And these are our sex centers. And so that thread of like repairing sexual health is whole health, and knowing that the health of our sexual reproductive bodies, again, matters, is worthy and deserving of deep care. Like these are just different threads for me that I feel like I've traversed through, and that I watch a lot of my clients traverse through as well.
So much there, so rich. And something I wanted just to add, an adjunct to that, of even just I could see the resonance in your body when you shared remembering your own experience of when your uterus was back in a more optimal position, of how that shifted. It sounds like energetically and emotionally, how you related to yourself. And I remember my first experience of it was from an energetic standpoint of being in my womb space and having this like, holy shit moment of like, we need to be teaching every woman this. And for me, it was very much of like, oh my God, like there has been a void. I've been trying to fill it. And it's like, I found my enoughness from the inside. And that's in my book, Radical Embodiment, we go through 7 main limiting beliefs. One is I'm not enough. And the practice to work through that is literally supporting a person and coming into their womb space, not like going into I'm enough.
Yeah, but like in
but how can you really be in that center point? Regardless, again, if you have your physical womb any longer or not, and how that almost automatically shifts. And I think it helps our nervous system feel safe because we're here.
Yes.
And then that doesn't mean if you're in your womb, if you're in your pelvis, our center, our home, there's not room for others to infiltrate as easily. Energy that we don't want.
I feel like 2 words that are coming up for me is like boundaries, like feeling our center, having the capacity to feel from our center, like resonance or non-resonance, and this like sacred boundary. And then also like belonging.
Yes.
Because I think we go so long in our journey of womanhood without feeling belonging to our womb, to our pelvis, to our bodies. And if we don't feel belonging here, where we are every moment of our life, like that's a hard thing for us to bear as women.
Totally. It makes me think of when I first moved to Boulder 10 years ago. I was going to this very small, there's 4 of us women. We'd drive an hour up the mountains, this little quaint women's circle. And our teacher, Tani Yvonne, she's an incredible woman, does incredible work. And I was really didn't have community, didn't know anybody here, and I felt like I belonged. And I remember she shared with me, she was like, Emily, and she looked me in the eye. She was like, you will never feel like you will never belong until you first belong to yourself. And it's, and it was a journey then of like, how do I belong to myself? But it's so true.
Oh, I love that. And I really appreciate that you brought the nervous system up. Because I feel like that's such a foundational piece of the work that I do with women as well, is allowing us to have a sensory shift within our nervous system and feel safety. Like that safety is not a concept like, oh, I'm safe in my body. Let me mantra that over and over. It's like, no, may we have a direct felt sense of belonging and safety in our body that is supported by our nervous system. And another just piece of that I think is so important for us to know as women is that when our nervous system is in resonance and regulated, I always say like blood flow goes where the nervous system tells it to flow. And when we're stressed and upregulated, or we don't feel safe and belonging in our deep womb, our center, our pelvis, our bodies as women, our nervous system will intentionally direct blood flow away from our reproductive organs and sex centers. And so now not only are we carrying this like schism and dissonance there or feeling disconnected from our body, but these spaces are receiving a literal lack of key blood nutrients and oxygen and blood flow, which impacts their health. And over time, these spaces can become deeply malnourished. It impacts our hormonal regulation, our dopamine, oxytocin production. It impacts our sense of libido, our sense of vibrancy and vitality, our menstrual cycle, so many things. And when we can support our nervous system in feeling safety and resonance and regulation, again, it redirects blood flow back to our reproductive organs and really re-enable sexual and reproductive health. And for me, I was like, wow, how long did I live where not only like emotionally, societally, culturally, was this place being starved, but then I was being starved in my own body by the direction of my nervous system and blood flow. So it's like on so many levels, when we start to nourish our center and come back to this place, we become then nourished in like a bountiful bountiful ways, and we can actually sense and feel and replenish and come back into regenerative health when blood flow and nervous system is supported and relanding.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
but I just find that so like
It's I mean, it's so fascinating and true. I'm so glad you articulated that way, right? From a nervous system level, from a very physiological, this isn't just like woo woo esoteric, like be in your womb, like woo, you feel good. It's also like from a very physiological level.
Yeah.
If your nervous system, where is the energy? What's happening? Stress and not getting the nutrients it needs, which will lead to disease,
which will lead to
disorder or unbalance. So if someone's listening to this and this might be new, or they're just curious to dive deeper, where might be, maybe it's a woman who feels insecure in her body, or who feels like, wow, I have like a lot of trauma, or like, oh, it sounds nice to go and like be with my womb space, or support myself in self-massage, but what are some like ways a person can start?
Yeah, I love this question. And earlier we were chatting around like that question of embodiment, like does it feel etheric or does it feel tangible? And I feel like the same thing for me. I asked such a similar question with the womb, because we're always like, feel into your womb. And it's like, well, that feels really perhaps etheric, or like I'm not really sure how to do that.
I know for a lot of folks it does. Definitely. Yeah.
So for me, just a foundational practice that I love, like one, I love setting the environment so that then we can kind of start tapping into our nervous system as I sit down in this space. Is this a space that supports my felt sense of safety? For you, that might be like a cozy pillow and a blanket in the corner of your room. Maybe you have a space that you enjoy connecting to yourself in, or just creating it super simply, but making it like feel nice, like lighting a candle, like let's make it feel good, and like come in with intention and curiosity as we start to come into this space that has gone through so much.
Yes.
Like really just starting with that act of care for ourselves by setting the environment. And then I really find it supportive to start to engage and widen our capacity to feel our womb by starting to first feel the basin of our bony pelvis and hips. And so for me, that's like, can I breathe into and feel my left hip? And maybe you spend some time there. How does left hip feel? Does it feel warm to breathe into her? Does it feel cold? Does it feel a little blocked? And we're just like listening and observing as loving listeners and as curious listeners for our bodies, as compassionate listeners. And then can I kind of practice sensing and feeling right hip? And maybe how does right hip feel? And already we're going to get so much information, so much sensory information. And then I really love to like hold both hips. And can I breathe in between my hips? And when we practice drawing that breath in between our hips and down into our pelvis, we're really starting to tap into womb. And that's where she is. She's between our hips and our deep pelvis. So I find kind of just, that breathing in between, like a really nice practice that helps us orient into our root.
Yeah.
And then just that, like the listening, even just saying, hello, womb, hello, center, I'm here.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just I love that you said like having that state of curiosity and just patience and knowing that that's like, that's such a great practice. And it's so enough, no matter what you feel, how little, how much. There's no wrong or right. You're not trying to get anywhere. You're just inviting in space.
Yeah.
Even 5 minutes every day.
Yeah.
Can be huge.
Huge.
And I'm checking in with my own body right now, and I'm just gonna like be vulnerable and share. Like I'm noticing, especially left hip, some like oh wow, like disconnection. Like there's some information my body's wanting to give. It's not like, oh, it just feels so juicy, yummy. And I can even tell my womb right now is a little like it feels contracted and dense internally, and that's not always the sensation that's present. And so just also sharing that, it's not like, oh, I'm in my womb and it's so good and it feels so
Yeah.
awesome. There can be a myriad of sensations.
Totally.
And depending on the day, depending on where you're at in your cycle, in your life, what's happening. And it's information that's so valuable to who you are as a human. And it's not wrong or bad. It's messages.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, there's wanting some attention here. There's more that's wanting to happen here. And okay, thank you, body, for giving
Thank
that.
you, body.
Like, wow, that's different for me to, and yeah.
Yeah. And I think just like what you just summed up there, like, oh, there's some tension. Okay, with that information, what would feel so good for that translation of tension, which is really just asking, hey, I'd love some love. I'd love some care. And I always share that with my clients, like pain or discomfort or tension or whatever it is, it's like X marks the spot. And practicing, not interpreting that as something wrong or bad, but as that sacred wisdom and information. And so it's like that part of us is saying, come love me here. Come be with me here. Come acknowledge me here. And I love that too. Like the gift of being seen and acknowledged.
Yes.
The gift of just seeing and acknowledging our body. I mean, sometimes for me, like as I tune into my womb, and she's like, oh, I'm like a little tired. And I just like see and acknowledge her. It's like, oh, that in of itself is such profound medicine.
Totally.
And how much we don't get seen or acknowledged there.
Totally. And like, love that. Like it can just be so plenty.
Yeah.
So enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I could ask you 1,000 more questions to go deeper into all of this. But for just, conscious of time, would love to hear, if someone's wanting to live, it might just be this practice. This practice is pretty amazing, but maybe it's something different of, if someone's wanting to live a more embodied life. And Alexandra and I were talking before we came on, and to me, it's a radical choice to choose to love your body as your body is. And it doesn't mean every day you feel, oh, my body's so amazing, but I'm choosing love, just like you might choose love in a committed relationship or partnership. You're choosing to love that human, choosing to love your body, choosing to be in your body, which isn't easy, particularly in a world that is very fast paced, very screen centric. So what might be some suggestions or practice that comes to you for somebody who's wanting to make that daily commitment to themselves?
I feel like really kind of just tying together a lot of what we've been talking about. And as we go through our days, like paying attention, does this make me feel like warm in my heart? Does this make me feel soft in my belly? Does this make me feel safe in my hips? Like, how are these choices and relationships and things that I'm involved in making me feel in my body? And my body is like a very wise place. And I just feel like starting to sensuously and sensually notice the feedback of our body and giving it more space to be heard. I think that's going to lead us into a lot more nourishment, into a lot more reclamation of our feminine physiology, when we can sense and feel and hear our body and orient towards caring for our body based on the sensations that we receive.
Yes. Yeah. So like, it sounds like just inviting your body into your daily process of decision making, of navigating through your day, of checking in, of how does my body feel about this? What does my body have to say about this? Yeah. Things that I always ask myself, particularly like right before my menstrual bleed or during my menstrual bleed is like, is this in service to me and my bleed? And if it's a no, it's a no for me now. That was hard at the beginning. Yeah. But that might be like, I'm not going to go out because I'm bleeding. And it feels the best for me to snuggle in with a book and rest, or do some journaling, or go on a slow, warm afternoon walk. Or is this in service? Does this make me feel nourished in my sexuality? Is this pace of this lovemaking supportive to my sexual body?
Is this friendship nourishing me and my womanhood? Like, just, yeah, all these things. Those are some things that I ask my own self.
Yeah, those are beautiful. I love to
Yeah.
have those questions distinct too, to clarify. Yeah.
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 Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
And it could even, what comes actually is just even thinking of, speaking of like food as nourishment, and
Totally.
even going into like, if you notice thoughts come up that are unkind or unhelpful or judgmental towards yourself to others, there's like, is this in service
Yeah.
of my body? Is this in service of like my highest good?
Yeah.
And see if framing an unhelpful thought, habitual behavior loop that doesn't feel supportive of you, see if even questioning it like that helps support you in shifting it from a place of softness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I really value those little moments like that, like more than any transformational weekend retreat or whatever it is.
Totally.
It's these little moments that we notice and nourish.
Yeah. That's what I think creates true change.
Yeah. And that feels like embodiment.
Yeah.
Like those real-time moments.
Yay.
Yeah.
To summarize.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So Alexandra, where can folks find out more about you, learn about working with you, learn about Yeah.
You can find me at Origin Pelvic Care on Instagram. That's probably the best place. Or you can go to originpelviccare.com, and I work with women online, and then I have it in person, hands-on ceremonial pelvic care practice here in Boulder, Colorado.
Awesome. And we'll have those linked in the show notes too.
Great.
And a question that came to me that I meant to ask earlier, but is there, if someone isn't local to Boulder and is looking for in-person care for hands-on, do you have resources, or is there a place
Reach
to
out.
Okay, so reach out to Alexandra if you're looking for that, and she
Yeah.
can help you find somebody
Yeah.
in your area. Like, of course,
Yeah.
maybe her online would be perfect for you, but I'm also thinking for someone's wanting
Totally.
or needing hands-on, depending what's happening,
Yeah.
how they can find support in their area.
It's an emerging field.
Yeah.
It's an emerging field, and it matters greatly. And I feel like you would probably agree, maybe not, but who we go see and the values of the person that we're seeing, particularly when it comes to deep pelvic internal work. And this is an emerging field. So totally reach out to me if you're not local to Colorado, and I would love to explore in my networks.
Beautiful.
How we
Thank
could
you
get
for
you
that.
connected.
Thank you for offering that. That feels important. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yay. Well, thank you, Alexandra, for being
Thanks,
here. I loved getting to hear deeper and connect with you in this way. And thank you everyone for tuning in, and check out her work. And reach out, and there's can be a lot of sensitivity or shame or uncertainty, specifically around, I think, feminine sexuality, and it's good that we're talking about it. And so don't hesitate, to reach out to her, to check out her website as a starting point. And for sure, just even start with that practice of checking with your pelvis, feeling those bony landmarks that you can have a really clear felt sense of.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. Take care.